And yeah, so we're going to keep going with this. Again, this is just a test run, so nobody is going to be seeing this. I'm using my fine graphic markers here. So this is a 5, and then I also got my 0.1, upside down, and my 0.3. So we're going to kind of work out the details as we go. So Washington, very early on, was kind of confronted with death, right? His father died before his older brother did, like when he went down to Barbados. And then he also had some battles with illness. Washington never sired an heir. You're letting a little bit of my Ulster Scot out there. But he did marry a wealthy Virginian, Martha Custis, who already had a couple kids of her own, who Washington kind of claimed as his own. And I know there's kind of like a big contingent of quote-unquote, like masculinity experts online right now that would frown against that, right? Like, you're not going to call George Washington a cuck or anything like that, of all things. But anyways, Washington fought in the French and Indian War, and Washington was loyal to the crown, right? He wasn't like a revolutionary, which some of his later sort of revolutionary kind of founding father compatriots sort of were, more like a Jefferson. But Washington understood that what the crown was doing was wrong. So to pay for the French and Indian War that Washington fought in, as a British soldier, basically, well, as a Virginia soldier, but as a British subject, Washington kind of realized that things were not on the up and up during that conflict. There's a big reason why you hear of George Washington today and you don't hear of Braddock, right? So Braddock was one of the officers that Washington had to serve under. And one of the things that's kind of not really understood anymore about war is that war was very different on Europe than it was in America. And I don't want to really crap on the British too much here, but they were always kind of more of a naval power than like a land, like a sort of army power. But the woods, in Europe, if you want to count Britain as Europe as well, even though they're not mainland, were much more different. Whereas in the American wilderness, not just due to like the Indian attacks and things like that, but also just like animals, and it was very unknown, right? Like, so the woods, the Puritans of Massachusetts had like a fear of the woods, like almost a superstition, like you wouldn't go out at night. The Cavaliers, not as much. The good old boys like the Scots and those kind of borderland types that ended up like in Tennessee and the Appalachians, they were kind of the chuds that were sent to fight a lot of these Indian battles and stuff, even through the end of the 19th century, kind of going into World War I and stuff. They were always like a martial class, but it was very different. So when British soldiers came over to fight the French, who had teamed up with some of the Indian tribes, they were not prepared for this, because I don't really want to use this word on my channel, but they called it combat, right? And it wasn't really like used as a derogatory term just for like slaves or anything like that. They mostly had respect, and if you want to call it that, friendly relations with them. It more meant like kind of like a savage culture, like these Indian tribes will pop out of trees in the middle of nowhere. They'll attack us in the middle of the night, things like that. We're in like the woods in Europe, not as deep, not as treacherous as the American woods, not as unknown. Europe, there was more like a old school war, like phalanxes and cavalry, formations, things like that. That didn't really work in the New World, and the European world actually didn't really get that. Like, they didn't get that memo until almost World War One. Whereas in America, especially in the American Civil War, that was sort of one of the first modern wars. They understood that, and Washington, again, he never left America. Right, he was always on the continent. He understood the warfare there, and Braddock wouldn't listen to him, and Braddock ended up dying on the battlefield, with Washington as one of his his subjects, like his inferiors. Then Washington eventually rose in the ranks, became a very popular military hero,